the Royal Armoured Corps or gone to war in a tank. But it seems to me, as an outsider looking in, that the Royal Armoured Corps at its best has an ethos, a characteristic spirit and belief that shines clearly through the smoke of war and the myriad complexities of peace. It's something that's essential to preserve because it's the Armoured Corps' soul. But while you can describe an organisation's size or shape quite easily, ethos is a more complicated business. There's nothing to catch or count. What I want to do in the next 20 minutes is to describe and illustrate that ethos more fully. Of course, history is important, and the Royal Armoured Corps weaves together two rich strands. The first takes us back to the cavalry, which fought on past battlefields, embroidering regimental standards and guidon, with the battle honours of 100 campaigns from Blenheim to the Boer War. There was something admirable about the cavalry ethos, much misunderstood though it was by ignorant outsiders and complacent insiders. An affection for the horse, which was, after all, the weapon platform of the day. An understanding of ground, reinforced across the hedges and ditches of the shires. The recognition that a fair decision now was better than a perfect one too late. And above all, an informal way of doing business, based on the fact that what you did was much more important than who you were. The second strand came out of the mud and blood of the Western Front during the First World War. The tank, its title a cunning and successful piece of deception, was originally a machine designed to deal with rough ground, barbed wire and trenches. After a promising debut on the Somme in the summer of 1916, it was used on a bigger scale at Cambrai the following November. The Royal Tank Regiment emerged from the Tank Corps, which was formed to man it. And when the British Army embarked on mechanisation in the interwar years, cavalry regiments forsook hooves for wheels and tracks. It was not an easy process. Many officers clung to the horse, forgetting that what mattered was not the platform, but the effect they were trying to produce on the battle space. In the interwar years, the British Army made some promising experimental advances into armoured warfare. But a combination of financial retrenchment and internecine feuding helped thwart what could have been a key lead. During the Second World War, British armour made a slow start. But in October 1942, it made a decisive contribution at El Alamein. Churchill declared that before it we never had a victory, and after it we scarcely had a defeat. And in 1944, armoured regiments went ashore in Normandy and fought their way through the Bocage, a grim attritional slog with much in common with the First World War, and on into Germany. I don't just dwell on the past because I'm a historian, but because the past influences the present and the future. One of the ways that we remember the past is through paintings, and these often give us a stylized view of what really happened. For instance, cavalry often made their most spectacular contribution by charging on the battlefield, and so this tended to be what got painted, the classic battle piece of brave men and plunging horses. In fact, cavalry often excelled at what we might call the small change of war. Very important, but far less exciting to paint. In the summer of 1812, Corporal William Hanley of the 14th Light Dragoons was on patrol with 8 troopers near the Spanish city of Salamanca. He sneaked into the French lines and captured 30 enemy troopers. When he was getting them away to safety, their colonel rode up. Thinking that Hanley had been captured, he slapped him on the back and said, "Good day, Englishman." Hanley whipped his sword out and captured him as well. It was the pre-medal age, but Hanley's officers had a special medal struck for him and presented it on a full-dress parade. The Hanley episode makes 2 key points. The first is that initiative and quick thinking were at the heart of the cavalry ethos. These were men who seized the fleeting moment. They were as much poacher as prize fighter, with an eye for the ground, and a fine sense of the art of the possible. The second point is that the bonds linking officers and men in good regiments, even in a harsher and more deferential age, were tight but comfortable. Brothers in arms indeed. From the formation of the Royal Armoured Corps until the present day, its main preoccupation has been with this: the main battle tank in a variety of guises. It combines characteristics of firepower, mobility and protection, and remains a very potent weapon. Indeed, at present you can't really fight land warfare against a major opponent without it. It won't last forever, any more than the horse did. Another type of platform will probably evolve, which will bring similar effects to the battlefield, but in a different way. At present, though, armour retains a wide utility across the whole spectrum of warfare, from high-intensity operations to the light role. And the tank's psychological impact in peace support operations underlines its enormous symbolism. The key point, though, is that this sort of thing is what the Armoured Corps fights with at present. Just as the horse was the cavalry's weapon platform at Salamanca, and the Sherman tank carried armoured regiments into battle in Normandy. These beasts may not be at the heart of the battlefield a century from now, but the qualities that animate their crew members will be. And this is what I mean by qualities: intellectual agility, the ability to do several jobs at the same time, to sip from the information torrent, and to keep pace with a complex situation that changes all the time. This requires stamina and robustness, not just physical, but mental. The Germans, who knew a thing or two about it, reckoned that in war, character counted for more than sheer intellect. The decisive factor, despite changes in technology, is the individual working in the small group. In situations like this, groups hold together not because of the shoulder-to-shoulder cohesion that comes from fear of public failure, and still less because of externally imposed discipline. What really counts is the trust, confidence, and mutual self-regard forged in the crucible of the turret. And it's not just a question of fighting an individual tank, any more than it might be, in a century or two, of fighting an individual space vehicle. Battle is a collective and dynamic activity. Success comes from generating purposeful action, even when detailed orders aren't available. This means understanding what a higher commander wants to achieve and quickly working out the detail of doing it, despite a changing situation. It means that moral courage is important, because there's always a good excuse for doing nothing. These qualities aren't tied to a particular level of war or a specific role, although reconnaissance sets a special premium on the ability to seize the fleeting moment, just as William Hanley did. Initiative is an indispensable part of the ethos. In August 1914, Major Tom Bridges commanded a squadron of the 4th Dragoon Guards in the first British cavalry engagement of the First World War. He routed the enemy force opposite him, putting out the German eyes on that part of the field, and establishing a moral ascendancy which British cavalry never really lost thereafter. At a higher level, commanders who read the battle well are often prepared to meet the crisis before it breaks. One of the reasons why Operation Goodwood, a British armoured offensive in Normandy in mid-July 1944, failed, was that the Germans, grimly experienced in defensive fighting, were ready to parry the blow before it actually fell. I've already mentioned the need to sip from the torrent of information. In the era of the digitized battlefield, as communications become ever more sophisticated, it's tempting to seek certainty, to wait until all the information is in. But war, especially 21st century war, isn't like that. Successful commanders will be those who go for the 80% solution and use instinct, intellect and experience to produce decisions which are about right, but very fast. By doing that, they'll maintain a high tempo,
a rate of activity which is remorselessly quicker than the enemy's. War is a mixture of art and science. It's awfully easy in a talk about ethos to emphasise the spiritual and ethereal qualities that help make it up. But remember that the art of war is underpinned by solid scientific foundations. Intellect and determination are no good if you haven't got the technical competence to make your weapons platform work, whatever it happens to be.
In the old days, horse mastership was every bit as important as horsemanship. The best regiment in the army was no use at all if its horses were quite literally knackered. Thus, technical competence is fundamental, whatever you're fighting from. And it's not a responsibility you can delegate. There's another quality that sums up everything I've talked about so far: style. This is a manner of behavior, a way of doing things. It's hard to counterfeit, and soldiers have the keenest of noses for bullshit. So style doesn't mean pretending to be something you're not. An attempt at faking it sometimes brings shallowness or superficiality. An effort to replace personal responsibility by spongy evasion. Or at the other extreme, an obsession with detail, which induces you to do everybody's job in addition to your own. Real style means imagination, a lightness of touch, the ability to trust, and dare I use the word, the need to care. I'm a historian, not a prophet, but I do believe that this is an ethos worth preserving. An ethos that is no more tied to Challenger 2 than it was to the Charger of Waterloo or the Tank Mark V of Cambrai. Of course, war will change, but armed forces will still need to produce the full range of effects, from heavy armour to medium rapid intervention to reconnaissance. The Royal Armoured Corps will remain central to the provision of these effects, although the chances are that technology will allow it to do so from rather lighter platforms than in the past. Its ethos will continue to reflect technical competence, lightness of touch, a remorseless determination to seize the initiative, and the recognition that when all is said and done, people matter most. An ethos forged in the past, but invaluable for the future.